Prehistoric creatures conjure up images of towering dinosaurs and colossal sea monsters, but some of the most terrifying killers to ever exist weren't giants at all. They were feathered, fanged, clawed, and often no bigger than a dog or even a chicken. If you had been unlucky enough to exist back then at their size, you wouldn't have called them cute. You'd have called them nightmares. In this video, we're diving into the world of tiny prehistoric predators, the ankle biters of ancient Earth that hunted in packs, ambushed from the shadows, and shredded anything smaller than them, and sometimes things much bigger. These weren't mindless beasts. Many were fast, agile, intelligent, and disturbingly efficient at killing. Let's meet 10 tiny psychotic killers that ruled the ancient world in ways the giants never could. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself shrunk down to the size of a rabbit, dropped into a warm, humid forest 150 million years ago. The air is thick with the smell of ferns and damp earth. Giant conifers stretch into a hazy sky, and somewhere far away, a massive sauropod crashes through the undergrowth like a living bulldozer. That's the kind of creature people usually think about when they picture the Jurassic. But down here, in the shadows between the roots, something else rules. You hear it before you see it. A fast, light patter over dry leaves. The faint rustle of something weaving through ferns with the confidence of a creature that's hunted this path 1,000 times. Then it appears, Compsognathus. At first glance, your brain almost wants to call it a bird without wings. It's roughly the length of a chicken, long-tailed and lightly built, with a narrow head packed full of needle-like teeth. Its eyes are large, alert, flicking from movement to movement with unnerving intensity. The creature pauses, tilts its head, and freezes so completely it's like someone just hit pause on a video. It's not looking at you, it's watching something else. Up ahead, a small lizard is basking on a sun-warmed rock, completely unaware that it's already been chosen. The Compsognathus lowers its body closer to the ground, long tail stretched out behind it for balance like a counterweight muscles twitch under its skin. This isn't a lumbering dinosaur, this is a living arrow being drawn back, waiting to be released. Then it moves. There's no dramatic roar, no stomping, no warning, just an explosion of speed. It darts forward with shocking precision, claws scraping soil, feet finding perfect purchase even on slippery roots and tangled plants. The lizard has barely started to flinch when the Compsognathus is already on it, jaws snapping shut like a trap. You see the flash of teeth, the violent shake of its head, and then it's done. The lizard hangs limp, and the tiny predator stands perfectly still again, as if nothing just happened. If you were seeing this from a distance, you might think, oh cute, it's so small. Up close, you realize that size has nothing to do with how terrifying a predator can be. This thing is built for killing, not for intimidation. In a world that worships giants, Compsognathus thrives by being the opposite. Fast instead of strong, precise instead of heavy, relentless instead of impressive. It doesn't waste energy chasing things it can't catch. It doesn't charge recklessly. It waits, stalks, strikes, and moves on. Now imagine there isn't just one. The undergrowth rustles again, but from a different direction. Another Compsognathus emerges, and then another. They don't move together like a perfectly synchronized wolf pack. These aren't mammals with complex social structures, but they are drawn to the same opportunities. Where prey is abundant, multiple little predators congregate like vultures with teeth and legs. A small mammal darts between the ferns, hoping to lose whatever it senses behind it. One Compsognathus flashes past, snapping at its heels, forcing it to veer off in panic. It doesn't notice the second one positioned just a few steps ahead, perfectly angled to intercept. The mammal sprints right into its jaws. To an observer, it almost looks coordinated, like a deadly game of you heard it, I catch it. But coordination or not, the result is the same. In this scaled-down battlefield, Compsognathus doesn't need to be tall to be terrifying, it only needs to be everywhere at once. Even its skeleton tells the story of how it lives. Hollow bones keep it light, long hind legs built for speed, a tail acting like a balancing rod so it can pivot mid-sprint and change direction in a heartbeat. The arms aren't heavy weapons, they're quick-grabbing tools, just strong enough to pin a struggling victim, hold it still, and bring those teeth into the perfect position. To a giant predator, a fallen branch is just an obstacle on the ground. To Compsognathus, it's a hiding place, a vantage point, a launch pad. It can vanish into the forest floor, then reappear in a blur of motion when something edible wanders too close. Its world is one of constant motion and constant hunger. Insects, lizards, baby dinosaurs, small mammals, anything it can overpower is fair game. You might think the forest belongs to the giants, but down here, every rustling leaf could be a tiny razor-toothed hunter deciding whether or not you fit in its mouth. Now imagine, just for a second, that you are its size. The ferns tower over you like walls. The roots form tangled mazes and shadowed tunnels. You never know what's waiting around the next bend, or what's watching you from the other side of a fallen log. When a Compsognathus appears, there is no dramatic build-up. You don't get to turn your head, see a giant monster, and run. No, it simply appears out of nowhere, already close, already focused, already committed. In that miniature world, it's not a small dinosaur. It's a nightmare scaled perfectly to you, and while the ground is dangerous, the air isn't any safer. The scene shifts. The forest changes. You're in a different place and time now. Early Cretaceous, in what will one day be northeastern China. The air is cooler, the forest denser, filled with ginkgo trees, ferns and conifers. A thin mist curls through the branches, and the whole world feels layered. Ground, shrubs, low branches, high canopy. Down below, the forest floor is a maze of fallen logs and rotten leaves. Tiny mammals flicker between shadows, birds flutter from branch to branch, and small dinosaurs pick their way through the undergrowth. But the true danger, that's above. You hear a soft rustle, but it's not the clumsy sound of something crashing down from a tree. It's more like fabric sliding through the air. You glance up, and there it is, gliding between the branches like a living feathered boomerang. Microraptor. Its body is small, about the size of a crow, but its silhouette is alien. Feathers spill not just from its arms, but from its legs as well, forming 4 functional wings. It doesn't flap like a modern bird. Instead, it stretches its limbs out and uses the height of the trees like a weapon, trading altitude for speed and silent control. As it glides, its tail feathers fan out like a rudder, subtly adjusting its path. It isn't just falling with style, it's steering, calculating, adjusting, choosing. Microraptor lands on a branch with surprising grace, claws gripping bark like steel hooks. Its head turns, its eyes lock onto something. Down below, a small bird-like dinosaur pecks at the ground, completely unaware. To it, the danger is usually lurking in the bushes or tall grass. It scans the undergrowth in front of it, never thinking to look straight up. That's the mistake. Microraptor shuffles along the branch, almost cat-like in its careful, measured steps. It positions itself above the target, leans forward, and drops. Its 4 wings catch the air, guiding it in a steep, controlled descent. Unlike a bird diving from the sky, Microraptor is dropping from the branches just above the victim, close enough that by the time the prey realizes something is coming, it's too late. Claws strike first. They slam into the small dinosaur's back, pinning it to the ground with shocking force for such a little creature. The struggle is frantic, but Microraptor is built for this hooked claws dig in, wings spread for balance, beak and teeth snapping down toward anything vulnerable. Neck, head, soft belly, exposed limb. To the prey, this isn't a fight. It's a sudden chaotic storm from above, all feathers and pain and panic. Microraptor doesn't roar. It doesn't shriek like a giant predator calling out its dominance. It's quiet, almost eerily so. It kills in a burst of motion, then vanishes back into the branches, dragging scraps of meat to a perch to feed in peace. In this forest, the vertical world is its playground. But Microraptor doesn't just hunt land animals. Near a forest pond, the water's surface is still, a perfect mirror broken only by the occasional ripple of an insect touching down, or a fish taking a breath near the top. Small animals come here to drink, and small predators come here to wait for them. However, Microraptor has a different plan. It clings to the trunk of a tree leaning over the water, its claws dug into the bark like ice picks. Its head tilts down, eyes locked on the dark shapes moving beneath the surface. The pond is full of fish, and that's a type of prey most tree-dwelling animals can only dream about catching. Microraptor, on the other hand, has options. It pushes off from the trunk, gliding low over the water like a shadow, just skimming the surface. At just the right moment, it dips down, extending its legs, and you can almost imagine its claws snatching at a fish near the surface, yanking it upwards in one smooth, practiced motion. Whether it caught mammals, small dinosaurs, birds, or fish, one thing is clear. This wasn't some confused, clumsy experiment of evolution. This was a specialist, a predator designed for a 3-dimensional environment where danger doesn't just come from the bushes or the sky. It comes from the branches directly above your head. Imagine trying to live in this forest as a small animal. You're already dodging things on the ground. Snakes, little carnivorous dinosaurs, maybe even bigger predators that don't mind snacking on something your size, but in this place, clearing the ground is only half the job. You'd have to constantly think about what might be watching you from above. Microraptor's feathers catch the dim forest light, shimmering with subtle patterns that might have helped it blend in with the shadows. From below, looking up, you might only see a faint outline against the leaves, a suggestion of movement there and gone. You might mistake it for a regular bird. Then it drops. What makes Microraptor so unnerving isn't just its appearance or its 4 wings. It's the way it weaponizes silence and gravity. Big predators have presence. You hear them, feel the vibrations of their footsteps, see the trees move aside for them. Microraptor is the opposite. It's absence. It's the thing you don't see until it's already on you, and it doesn't need to be big to be terrifying. At its scale, it's perfectly tuned to its environment. Its size is a feature, not a flaw. Being small means it can fit into densely packed branches, cling easily to trunks, glide between layers of forest where a larger creature would get stuck or fall. To a frog, a small dinosaur, a primitive bird or a mammal, this wasn't some cute little feathered dinosaur. It was a stealth bomber with claws. Picture a quiet evening in that Cretaceous forest. The light is fading, and the canopy glows with the last traces of sunlight. Below, shadows stretch and merge. You might hear the distant heavy footfall of a larger dinosaur returning to a resting spot. You might hear insects buzzing, leaves rustling in the breeze, the gentle splash of something in a pond. Then there's a soft whuff sound over your head, so faint you barely process it. Just a shape gliding across the fading light, its body stretched out, tail feathers fanned. For a moment, you think it's just another bird going to roost. Then something screams, and the forest goes back to being quiet. On the ground, Compsognathus is the small, relentless runner that appears from nowhere and disappears just as quickly, always hungry, always hunting, turning the forest floor into a deadly maze. Up in the trees, Microraptor is the silent executioner, gliding from above with 4 wings and hooked claws, turning every branch and shadow into a potential attack point. Neither of them roar, neither of them tower, neither of them care that in the distant future humans will prefer to draw giant dinosaurs on t-shirts and posters. Back then, if you were their size, you wouldn't be thinking about how small they look. You'd be thinking about how there's nowhere left to feel safe. The sun hangs low over a sea of rippling sand, turning the sky into a washed-out orange sheet. This isn't the roaring, thunderstorm-filled jungle people imagine when they think of dinosaurs. This is harsher, drier. Wind scrapes grains of sand against exposed rock, leaving only stubborn shrubs and scattered bones to break the emptiness. You're standing, well, in your imagination anyway, in the late Cretaceous, in what will one day be Mongolia. To your left, a cluster of low dunes. To your right, a rocky outcrop pockmarked with crevices. The wind is constant. The silence feels heavy. Then you notice something that breaks the stillness. Tracks. They're not the huge, deep impressions made by massive dinosaur feet. These are smaller, thin, bird-like footprints, arranged in pairs, each about the length of your hand. The toes are narrow, with one clearly raised claw leaving only a faint mark beside the others. They're fresh. You follow them along the base of the rock where sand has collected in a shallow curve. The prints weave between the scattered stones, sometimes converging, sometimes splitting. They don't belong to just one animal. There are several sets, overlapping, drifting apart, coming back together again. You're not alone out here. Between 2 rocks half buried in sand, something moves. At first it looks like a pale, low shape hugging the ground, blending in with the shadows. Then it straightens and freezes, and you finally see it clearly. It's about the size of a large turkey, but your brain refuses to file it under bird. Its body is sleek and lightly built, a long tail stiff behind it like a balancing rod. Feathers cover most of its form. Simple, not like the extravagant wings of modern birds, but enough to give it that strange, half-familiar outline. Then your eyes drop to its feet. Each one has a long, curved sickle claw raised off the ground, kept sharp by being held in the air like a permanently cocked weapon. Even from a distance, that claw looks wrong, like something designed with a very specific purpose, to pierce, slash, and hold. This is a velociraptor. It turns its head, and you see the skull shape that made it famous. Long, narrow, lined with sharp, serrated teeth, perfectly suited to slicing meat. Its eyes are set forward, giving it binocular vision. This isn't a creature that just stumbles into food. It judges distance. It calculates. For a moment it just studies the landscape. You watch as it lowers its body slightly, tail lifting to counterbalance the shift in weight. It takes a slow step, then another. Its movements aren't clumsy or hesitant. They're measured, controlled, almost unnervingly quiet. In the far distance something else moves. A small herbivorous dinosaur, something about the size of a sheep, picks at tough, low-growing plants. It shifts nervously now and then, lifting its head to sniff the air, then returning to feeding. It's alone, or at least it thinks it is. The velociraptor isn't heading straight toward it. Instead, it arcs off to the side, slightly around it, as if trying to position itself at an angle. You're just starting to wonder why when you notice more movement. Another velociraptor, and then a third. They're not marching side by side like perfectly trained soldiers. They're scattered, each animal focused on its own path, weaving through rocks and dips in the ground, but their arcs are slowly forming a loose crescent around the herbivore. Whether you call this true pack hunting or not doesn't matter to the prey. The plant-eater finally senses that something is wrong. Its head jerks up, eyes wide, muscles tensing. It scans the horizon, but that's its first mistake. It's looking for a single threat. A big, obvious danger. A huge predator you can spot from far away. Instead, the danger is small, fast, and already in position. One velociraptor appears to its left, cresting a low ridge at a trot. The herbivore panics and stumbles away from it, turning to escape in the opposite direction, right into the path of another. The second raptor doesn't rush in recklessly. It slows, adjusts, almost as if reading the prey's movements. The third one closes in from behind, tightening the invisible net. The plant-eater bolts forward, its legs pumping, but the ground is uneven, the sand loose. It slips just enough. That's all they need. The raptor closest to its flank lunges, feet leaving the ground for a second as it leaps, sickle claw swinging forward like a hooked blade. It doesn't need to bring the animal down instantly. It just needs to injure it badly enough to slow it. Claw meets flesh. The herbivore screams as the raptor's claw slashes into its side, ripping into muscle, possibly puncturing deep into its body. It stumbles, nearly falling. Blood spatters the sand bright against the pale ground. The injured dinosaur tries to keep running, but its stride is broken now, uneven and desperate. The other raptors surge in, emboldened by the weakness. One nips at the tail, another darts in to snap at a hind leg, always harassing, always looking for another opening. They're not trying to crush their prey with one overwhelming strike. They're wearing it down. Each leap is followed by a quick retreat. Each slash cuts a little deeper. Each bite steals a little more strength. The herbivore staggers, lungs burning, heart thundering, vision narrowing. It tries to turn and face its attackers, but there are too many angles to watch. You notice something about the raptor's movements. They're opportunistic, but not wild. They're not frothing, chaotic beasts. They're focused. Every step, every feint, every test strike is part of a pattern. Eventually the herbivore collapses, legs folding as exhaustion, blood loss, and pain hit all at once. It gasps in the sand, struggling to rise. A velociraptor moves in, this time not aiming for a quick slash and retreat. It plants one foot on the prey's side, using that lethal sickle claw like a hooked anchor, pinning the animal just enough to hold it down. Its jaws plunge repeatedly into softer areas, around the throat, the belly, exposed flesh already torn by earlier strikes. The others join in. Sand, feathers, and blood mix into a single chaotic scene, but it's over quickly. The victim stops moving. The raptors feed, tearing chunks free, flicking their heads to rip meat from bone. If you'd grown up only watching oversized Hollywood-style velociraptors, you might be tempted to think, they're smaller than I imagined. But standing here in your mind, just a few meters away from them as they feed, the thought feels ridiculous. Size doesn't matter. Speed matters. Those sickle claws matter. Those forward-facing, calculating eyes matter. In their world, they don't need to be giants. They just need to be fast enough to catch you, coordinated enough to trap you, and relentless enough to keep attacking until you fall. As the sun dips closer to the horizon, the desert starts to cool. Long shadows stretch across the sand. The raptors eventually move on, bellies full, leaving behind a mangled skeleton and a story written in tracks and blood. Later, wind will erase those tracks. The bones will sink into the earth. Millions of years later, all that's left for humans to find is rock, and the occasional fossil locked in a final violent pose, a velociraptor locked in combat with its prey, claws still raised, teeth still bared. But in this moment, as you stand in the fading light of their world, those bones are alive, and for the creatures that shared this land with them, velociraptors weren't misunderstood movie stars. They were a daily, intimate terror. Now the light fades further. Another place. Another time. The world shifts from open desert to something more familiar. Cooler air, thicker vegetation, patches of forest intercut with open spaces. Low hills rise in the distance. It's still the late Cretaceous, but now you're in what will one day be North America or Asia, beneath a night sky spattered with stars. The darkness here isn't empty. It's alive with sound. Insects chirp in a constant rhythm. Somewhere far off, a larger dinosaur lets out a low, distant call. Leaves rustle as something small moves through the undergrowth, paws pressing softly into damp soil. You squint into the moonlit shadows and catch sight of it. A little mammal-like creature, no bigger than a rat, snuffling around the base of a fallen log. It stops, curls its whiskers forward, and digs in the leaf litter, hunting for insects and seeds. It thinks it's being cautious. It has no idea what's watching it. From just beyond the circle of moonlight, a pair of eyes glows faintly. Large, round, and forward-facing, they reflect just enough light to reveal their presence in a quick, eerie shimmer. Then they blink, and the forest returns to darkness. The creature those eyes belong to is small, slender, lightweight, maybe the size of a large dog at most, but usually smaller. Feathers or fine filament-like structures cover parts of its body. A long, flexible tail extends behind it for balance. Its head is relatively large compared to its body, and inside that skull the brain is bigger than what you'd expect for a dinosaur of its size. Proportionally, it's a mental powerhouse in its world. This is a troodontid. It steps forward quietly, each footfall placed with care. Like a raptor, it has a sickle-like claw on each foot, lifted slightly off the ground to keep it razor-sharp, but its overall frame is more delicate, its limbs longer, its movements thoughtful. It pauses. You can almost imagine a flood of sensory data moving through that brain. Sound, smell, sight, all being processed and weighed. The mammal at the log is too focused on its foraging to realize that something is triangulating its position in the dark. The troodontid shifts its weight and circles slightly, using the undergrowth as cover. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need to. Its advantage isn't just its claw or its teeth. Its advantage is how quickly it can think. Another sound reaches its ears, a rustle to the side. The troodontid freezes and turns its head, one eye focusing on a second small animal creeping between exposed roots. It now has a choice. 2 potential targets. Rather than blundering in, it stops and listens. You can almost feel the cold, simple calculation. Which one is easier? Which one is closer to an escape route if something larger appears? Which one is least likely to sense danger in time? It chooses. Slowly it leans forward, posture dropping lower, tail rising slightly for balance. It glides between patches of shadow, each step bringing it closer, but never too close, never too fast. The mammal at the log finally stops what it's doing. Its ears twitch. It lifts its head and sniffs, sensing that something is wrong. The forest sounds continue around it, but a piece of its ancient brain whispers, "Run!" But that signal comes just a little too late. The troodontid launches. It doesn't roar or scream. It simply covers the last bit of distance in a sudden burst of speed, claws extended, jaws open. The mammal darts, attempts to dive under the log, but the troodontid's sickle claw hooks its side, yanking it back out into the open. Teeth sink into flesh, not the massive bone-crushing teeth of a large predator, but sharp enough and strong enough for something this size. The mammal kicks and twists, tiny limbs flailing, but the troodontid adjusts, shifting its grip. Stepping over the body to hold it down more securely, it turns its head slightly, aiming for a more vital spot. There's nothing frantic about its behavior, just focus. When the struggling stops, the troodontid remains still for a moment, head lifted, listening again. It's checking the forest, in case the sounds of the brief scuffle have attracted unwanted attention. Only when the night stays calm does it lower its head and begin to feed. You watch as it eats in careful, methodical bites. This is the product of evolution tuning an animal, not just for physical power, but for awareness. Larger dinosaurs may have ruled the open plains and rivers, but here, in the dim undergrowth and cool shadows, brains and stealth matter just as much as brute strength. Later, as the night deepens, the troodontid moves on. It wanders deeper into the forest, and the landscape shifts slightly. Patches of snow appear in certain regions, frost gathering on leaves and fallen branches at the coldest times of year. You see another troodontid now standing at the edge of a snowy clearing, breath steaming in the cold air. Its feathers help trap warmth, an advantage in cooler climates. Snow muffles sound, but it also preserves tracks, and this predator uses both facts to its benefit. A small bird-like dinosaur hops across the snow, pecking at whatever plant matter it can find. The open ground gives it a clear view, but also leaves it exposed. The troodontid watches from the tree line, head tilted slightly. It studies how the bird moves, how often it looks up, how close it strays to the shadows. It might wait minutes, it might wait longer. Patience is one of its deadliest tools. Finally, the bird turns away from the forest and focuses on something in the snow. In that instant, its back is exposed, its attention narrowed, its world shrunk to a tiny patch of ground. The troodontid seizes the moment. It darts forward in near silence, feet barely breaking the crust of snow. The bird hears it at the last second, wings flaring, but the troodontid's claw hooks into its side, dragging it down. Feathers scatter, snow flies, and the forest swallows the brief sounds of panic. It doesn't take much to imagine how living alongside these creatures would feel if you were their size. Like spending your entire life in a haunted house where the ghosts are smart, patient, and hungry. You wouldn't just fear what you could hear, you'd fear what was thinking about you, and that's what makes troodontids particularly unsettling. Not just that they were small killers in the dark, but that their brains were advanced enough to make them flexible, adaptable hunters. They could respond to changes in their environment faster than many other dinosaurs, switching targets, altering tactics, learning from experience. In the great theatre of prehistory, they weren't the biggest or the loudest players. They were the ones paying the most attention. So in this ancient night, under a sky filled with stars that haven't yet been given names, a small feathered predator stands at the edge of the trees, eyes wide and searching, brain humming with quiet calculation. Somewhere in the undergrowth, something small moves, unaware that it's just become a problem the troodontid is already solving. If you were there with it, if you were its size sharing that forest, you wouldn't hear a roar. You'd feel a presence. You'd sense that something out there was watching, waiting, thinking, and by the time you finally saw the glow of those eyes in the dark, it wouldn't feel like you'd stumbled onto a mindless beast. It would feel like you'd just been noticed by something that had already decided what to do with you. The forest is quieter here, not silent, never silent, but the sounds are softer, muffled by thick layers of moss and needles. The air smells like sap and damp wood. Trees crowd close together, their trunks rising like pillars into a dim green ceiling of branches and leaves. Shafts of light stab through the canopy in narrow beams, catching dust, spores, and drifting fragments of leaves as they float downward. You're somewhere in the early Cretaceous of what will one day be northeastern China. Around you, the ground is uneven, studded with roots, fallen branches, and the occasional exposed rock. Small streams cut through the forest, the water dark and cool, feeding ferns and low plants that carpet the shadows. Something moves overhead, not a crashing branch, not the panicked thrash of a large animal, just a whisper, soft, like fingers running along fabric. You glance up, but the branches are thick, and whatever brushed past is already gone. A small lizard scurries across the forest floor in front of you, pausing now and then to taste the air. It has no idea that it's walking into the center of someone else's hunting ground. High above, clinging to a branch with curved claws, hangs a shape that could almost be mistaken for a bird at a glance. Feathers, long and filamentous, line its arms and tail, but the head is wrong for a bird, longer, filled with sharp, backward curved teeth. The eyes are larger, more intense. Sinornithosaurus. It doesn't move like a clumsy reptile testing each step. It moves like something that has total confidence in its own body, a creature that knows exactly what it can do. It creeps forward along the branch, each clawed hand and foot gripping bark with unsettling ease. The tail extends behind it like a balancing rod, feathers trailing softly. It stops, its head lowers, eyes focusing on the lizard below. The world narrows down to distances and trajectories. The angle of the branch, the slope of the ground, the gap between its perch and the forest floor, it takes all of it in with a single sharp stare. Fossils suggest that Sinornithosaurus might have had specialized teeth, long grooved fangs near the front of its upper jaw. Some paleontologists think those grooves might have channeled venom, seeping from glands down into the bite like a snake's, turning a simple puncture into something far more sinister. Now imagine for a moment that's true. The Sinornithosaurus doesn't need to overpower its prey with sheer force. It doesn't need to break bones or crush throats in one go. It just needs to get those teeth in once. So it waits. The lizard pauses by a patch of sunlight, basking for a few seconds, and starts to move again, wandering closer to the base of the tree. It's alert, but not alert enough. Its attention is on the ground, on smells, on the slightest rustle in the leaf litter, not on what might be directly above it. The Sinornithosaurus tenses. Every feather, every tendon, every muscle seems to hold its breath. Then it drops. For a split second, it's just a blur of feathers and claws falling through the air. It doesn't glide like Microraptor. It uses gravity like a hammer. It hits the ground almost on top of the lizard, claws outstretched. The impact kicks up a burst of leaves and dirt. The lizard tries to bolt, but the Sinornithosaurus is faster. One clawed foot pins its tail. A hand plants on its back. Its head darts down, and those long, sharp teeth sink into flesh. The lizard convulses, twisting and bucking in a desperate attempt to get away. The Sinornithosaurus doesn't tear a huge chunk out right away, it just holds on, jaws set, teeth buried. If there is venom, it's flowing now, sliding along grooves, mixing with blood, soaking into muscle and nerves. Maybe the lizard's vision starts to blur, maybe its heartbeat stutters, maybe its muscles stop cooperating, locking in spasm or going limp. The struggle slows. The Sinornithosaurus finally releases its grip and steps back just slightly, head tilted in what almost looks like curiosity. The lizard twitches once more, weakly. Then it just stops. No roar, no dramatic finishing blow, just a quiet, efficient end. The Sinornithosaurus lowers its head again and begins to feed, plucking strips of flesh with sharp, precise bites. It doesn't rush. It doesn't seem to expect a fight anymore. It just eats, calm and unbothered, as if it knows the danger has passed exactly when its victim does. You watch it for a while, then notice something else. This forest is made for ambush. The branches are close together, the ground is buried under a thick blanket of leaves, and visibility is limited. If a predator can climb, cling, and strike from above, it has an enormous advantage, and Sinornithosaurus can do all three. Later, as the day goes on, the forest light shifts. Patches of sun crawl slowly across the ground. Small early birds flutter among the branches, calling to each other in short, sharp bursts. Rodent-like mammals dart between roots, pausing to sniff and listen. High in the trees, Sinornithosaurus is on the move again. It's not a ground runner like some of the other tiny killers you've met. It's a stalker that treats the vertical world like its personal hunting trail. It moves along branches, hops to neighbouring trees, and occasionally pauses to cling to the trunk, head pressed close as if listening for movements inside the bark. Imagine being one of those early mammals living in this forest. The trees are your sanctuary. You climb to escape ground predators, nest in hollows, hide in crooks where branches meet. Up here, you expect safety. But Sinornithosaurus also lives up here. You're curled in a hollow halfway up a tree, tiny paws tucked under your body. The warmth of the day has seeped into the wood and you doze, breathing slow and even. You don't see the claws gripping bark just outside. You don't hear the faint scrape as something shifts its weight. The Sinornithosaurus moves sideways along the trunk, hugging the bark, head turned toward the hollow. Its eyes are wide and alert. It can smell you. It can feel the faint vibrations of your movements through the wood. Slowly, almost gently, it leans in. Its snout slips partway into the hollow, teeth bared. For a heartbeat, the world is still. Then it strikes. You can almost hear the tiny mammal's scream as teeth close around soft fur and flesh. It writhes, tries to pull back, claws scraping desperately against its wooden shelter. But once again, the predator doesn't need to drag it out by brute force. It just needs to hold on long enough. If venom is there, it does its work. The mammal's limbs weaken, its struggles falter. The fight drains away, not because it decides to give up, but because its body simply stops answering its frantic commands. The Sinornithosaurus backs out of the hollow with its prize, gripping it like a cat carrying prey, and hops lightly to a nearby branch. It crouches there, balanced and steady, and begins to eat while the forest continues around it, unaware or uncaring. There's something especially chilling about the idea of a venomous dinosaur, not because venom itself is rare, but because it represents another layer of intent. A bite isn't just an injury, it's a clock. Once it lands, all the victim can do is wait for its own body to betray it. In a world where most people imagine huge dinosaurs ruling through power and size, Sinornithosaurus represents a more intimate kind of horror. The quiet, close-range killer that doesn't chase you across plains or roar your name into the sky. It just gets near you, bites once, and lets time finish the job. Eventually, as the light fades, the forest shifts toward evening. The colours deepen, the shadows stretch. The Sinornithosaurus climbs higher, possibly finding a safe place among the branches to rest, feathers fluffing slightly as the air cools. Far below, the lizard and the small mammal are gone, reduced to scraps and stains in the dirt. The killer that took them is somewhere above, silent, breathing slow, waiting for the next day. And in the layered history of Earth, long before it ever existed, another tiny terror ruled a very different kind of world. The air is thicker here, not in the sense of fog or smoke, but rich, heavy, loaded with oxygen in a way you've never experienced. The sky is a murky, filtered blue, hazed by distant spores and humid air rising from endless wetlands. You're deep in the Carboniferous period, more than 300 million years before any dinosaur will set foot on land. Around you stretches a forest of giants. Not modern trees, but towering club mosses and horsetails, their trunks straight and column-like, their tops exploding into fronds and branches far overhead. The ground is soggy, covered in decaying plant matter, moss, and shallow pools of dark, still water. Gigantic ferns fill the gaps, their fronds overlapping like umbrellas, and everything is alive with insects. They crawl on the tree bark, wriggle through the mud, buzz through the air in constantly shifting clouds. Some are familiar in shape, a distant echo of dragonflies, beetles, roaches. Others look strange, half-formed experiments in the history of life. But one, in particular, owns the skies. You hear it first, a low, steady buzz. Not the delicate flutter of a modern housefly, but something deeper, more powerful. It's the sound of wings large enough to displace real air, to stir your hair if you are close enough. Something flashes past your face and vanishes between tree trunks. You catch only a blur, long veined wings, a narrow body, bulging eyes that reflect the dim light like polished glass. Meganeura. It circles back around, and this time you get a better look. Its wingspan is nearly as wide as your arm, up to 70 centimeters or more in life. 4 enormous, translucent wings beat the air with practiced ease, tilting and adjusting at the slightest muscle movement. Its head is dominated by those eyes, compound, faceted, enormous. Each one is like a dome made of gleaming panels, giving it a near spherical view of the world between them. Strong mandibles jut forward, built to bite and tear. To the insects in this forest, Meganeura is not a gentle giant. It is death in flight. You follow it as it glides above a swampy clearing, moving with the lazy, unconcerned path of an apex predator that doesn't need to rush. Below it, a swarm of smaller insects hovers above a stagnant pool, their bodies pulsing with rhythmic wing beats, their attention focused on feeding, mating, surviving. They don't see what's coming. Meganeura tilts its wings and banks, almost effortlessly, drawing a wide arc through the humid air. Its long legs hang slightly beneath its body, each tipped with spines and hooks. It lines up its approach the way a hawk might. Not random, but precise, picking a target in the swarm, and then it accelerates. The lazy glide snaps into a powerful direct rush. Wings blur, the buzz deepens. The distance between predator and prey collapses in seconds. There's no dramatic collision, just a sharp, decisive moment. The legs shoot forward, hooks closing around a smaller insect in midair. It's like watching a pair of barbed hands snatch a fly out of existence. Meganeura doesn't even slow down at first. It keeps flying, adjusting its grip, bringing the struggling prey up toward its head. Mandibles open and close in rapid mechanical bites. The victim's wings tear, bits of exoskeleton crack, fluids leak. Within moments, the shape in its grip stops moving. The giant dragonfly veers toward a tree trunk and lands, clinging with its spined legs. It angles the prey like a person might hold a sandwich, calmly finishing its meal while the forest hums around it. You can see why letting something like this grow large in an oxygen-rich world was such a bad day for everything smaller. You watch Meganeura's head move, eyes always scanning. It's not just motion sensitive, it's motion obsessed. Any twitch, any flicker in its field of view is registered, considered, sorted into ignore or attack. Below, on a broad fern frond, another insect, something beetle-like, armoured and slow, makes the mistake of crawling into an open patch of leaf. Meganeura's head snaps toward it. The wings flare, buzz intensifies, and it lifts off the bark. It glides for only a few meters, then lets gravity pull it down at just the right angle. Again, the legs shoot forward, and the beetle is ripped from its surface. Legs flailing uselessly in the air, mandibles go to work. These attacks are fast, efficient, and constant. In this world, Meganeura doesn't have to worry about birds. They don't exist yet. It doesn't have to fear mammals or reptiles as we know them. Vertebrate life on land is still in its early stages. Its competition is other insects and maybe some early amphibians. Up here in the air it's untouchable. You imagine being insect-sized in this forest. The ground is a dark labyrinth of decaying plants, fungi, and roots. The air is thick with floating spores and drifting seeds. Every time you lift off to fly from one tree to another, you run a risk. Because Meganeura might already be watching, you take off, wings beating nervously, navigating between fern fronds. Behind you, there's a sound. Just a shift, a change in the pattern of the background buzz. You don't have time to turn. Hooks close around your body, squeezing, spines digging into your exoskeleton. The world flips upside down as you're lifted, carried, your own wings still beating in a panicked, futile rhythm. Then they're torn away, one by one, as mandibles bite and pull. You don't go out with a dramatic scream, you just stop. Meganeura isn't sentimental. It doesn't leave pieces behind out of carelessness. It feeds thoroughly, then moves on, circling again, ready to repeat the process. Sometimes it hunts over water. You stand at the edge of a dark, still pond, watching ripples disturb the surface. Small aquatic creatures flicker just below the waterline. Near the shore, early amphibians lurk in the shallows, waiting to snap up unwary insects that land on the surface. But they're not the only ones hunting here. Meganeura glides low across the pond, its reflection skimming over the water like a ghostly double. It's high enough to avoid being snatched by anything below, but low enough to spot insects touching down on the surface tension. One of those insects makes a fatal mistake, landing for just a second too long. Meganeura angles its wings, dips slightly lower, and with shocking quickness reaches down to grab the insect off the surface. The water barely has time to ripple before the victim is gone, now just another small piece of fuel powering the giant hunter's continuous patrol through the forest canopy. The most unsettling part is how casual it all feels. To Meganeura, this isn't rage or bloodlust, it's just what it does. Hunt, catch, eat, repeat. All day long, it moves through the ancient air like a living scythe, trimming the population of other insects with icy efficiency. From a human perspective, we tend to think of dragonflies as delicate, even beautiful. We admire the shimmer of their wings, the way they hover and dart over ponds, but if you shrink yourself down to the size of a fly, suddenly that beauty becomes something else entirely. Meganeura is that feeling turned up to maximum. It is the nightmare behind the hum of wings, the shadow that blots out the light for a split second, the blur that ends your life before you even know you're in danger. And just like the tiny feathered assassins that will come millions of years after it proves a simple rule of prehistoric life. You don't have to be big to be terrifying. You just have to be perfectly built to kill at your own scale. The world around you is water. Not the bright, clear blue of a tropical beach, but a murky, greenish haze where light fights to reach the bottom. You're in a shallow sea hundreds of millions of years ago, long before any dinosaur has taken a step on land above. The surface ripples faintly, casting shifting patterns of light onto the seafloor. Below, the ground is a patchwork of sand, silt, shells, and the scattered remains of ancient creatures. It feels calm, but that's only because you don't yet know what's hiding here. You imagine yourself shrunk down to the size of a small fish, hovering just above the seafloor. Strange plants, more like feathery fronds and mats of algae, cling to rocks. Worms wriggle through the sediment. Slow-moving trilobites shuffle along in busy little herds, their many legs ticking rhythmically under their armoured bodies. And weaving through all of it, like armoured ghosts, are the hunters. At first you don't notice them. Their bodies blend with the brown and grey of the seabed. Then one moves just enough to catch your eye. It's maybe the size of a cat, though some are smaller, some a bit larger. Its body is wide and flattened, segmented like the plates of a tank, with a broad head shield shaped like a spade or a horseshoe. On the front, two large, claw-like appendages jut forward, jointed and spined, opening and closing with unsettling precision. A eurypterid, a sea scorpion. Its eyes gleam, small, dark, and deeply set into its head shield. They don't look expressive. They look practical, tools for locking onto movement and distance. Nothing more. It moves with surprising speed for something that looks so heavy, skimming just above the seafloor using oar-like swimming legs. Each paddle stroke is smooth, controlled, efficient. It glides past a cluster of trilobites, and even though they shift nervously, it doesn't strike. Not yet. It's still choosing. Another eurypterid lurks nearby, half buried in the sediment. Only the outline of its head shield and the faint rise of its segments give it away. From this angle, it looks like a rock, a harmless bump in the landscape, until it moves. You watch as a small fish, primitive, boneless, more like a dart with fins, drifts too close. It's focused on the water column above, on tiny floating organisms, not on what might be lying beneath it. The buried eurypterid springs to life. Its body lifts in a sudden coordinated flex. The spined claws snap upward, forming a cage of chitinous bars. The fish doesn't even have time to dart away. The claws close around it, spines digging into soft flesh, pinning it in place. There's no dramatic thrashing, just a brief struggle, a flick of the fish's tail, then nothing. The eurypterid adjusts its grip, bringing the prey toward its mouth, simple but effective gnawing parts that tear chunks away. It begins to feed right there, half supported by the seafloor, half floating. Limbs steady it. The body gently rocks. To everything else nearby it's a warning. You look around and start to see them everywhere now. One crawling along the sand, its body low, claws held just above the ground like a scorpion's pincers frozen mid-threat. Another gliding above the seafloor, shadow passing over trilobites that flatten themselves, hoping not to be noticed. Another even smaller one squeezing into the crevice of a rock, only its tail and a single claw visible as it tries to flush something out from within. They aren't enormous monsters, they're not towering, unstoppable beasts, but in this world at this scale, they're apex predators, a combination of armor, speed, and weaponry, wrapped into a compact, relentless package. You drift a little higher in the water, imagining what it would feel like to be a small swimmer here. You think you'd be safe if you just stayed mid-water, away from the bottom. Then you see that even that isn't safe. One of the Eurypterids, slightly more streamlined than the others, tilts its body and starts paddling upward. Its oar-like legs beat with firm, deliberate strokes, lifting it smoothly off the seafloor. Its tail extends behind, acting as a stabilizer. It's not clumsy, it's graceful. It rises just beneath a school of tiny fish-like creatures, timing its ascent. Its claws open, not wide like a dramatic grab, but just enough, like a trap being gently set. Then, with a quick kick, it surges forward, slicing through the school. The water explodes into movement. Tiny bodies flash in all directions, but the Eurypterid's claws snap shut on one of them. The others vanish into the haze, hearts pounding, if they have hearts. The hunter doesn't chase them, or it doesn't need to. It has already won. It descends again, dragging the captured prey down with it, back into its domain, a world of sand, shells, and quiet, ambush-heavy patience. You notice how everything about it is built with purpose. The claws aren't crude. Each spine, each joint, each movement is tuned for gripping prey, not just stabbing it. Its armor isn't just a shield. It allows it to survive glancing blows, collisions, and desperate thrashes from animals that do not want to die. In some species, the tail ends in a spine. You imagine the smaller ones using it to jab at anything that tries to attack them from behind. A last line of defense in a world where everything is both hunter and hunted. Picture yourself as a trilobite. You crawl across the seafloor, antennae sweeping left and right, picking up chemical signals in the water. Above you, light filters down in columns. Around you, others of your kind move in loose waves, grazing on whatever organic matter they can find. Every now and then the group tightens instinctively, clusters closer, flattens. It's a reflex embedded deep within your nervous system. Something in the water feels wrong, a faint vibration, a shadow. Behind the group, half hidden in a slightly darker patch of sand, a Eurypterid is adjusting its position. It hasn't attacked yet, it's waiting for exactly the right angle. The edge of the trilobite cluster drifts nearer, legs ticking lightly. One individual strays just a little farther out, more exposed than the others. Maybe it found a particularly tasty patch of food. Maybe it's just a bit slower. The Eurypterid moves now. It bursts forward in a sudden rush, sand exploding in a cloud behind it. Its claws sweep out and slam around the isolated trilobite, spines hooking under its shell, lifting it off the seafloor. The trilobite curls reflexively, trying to shield its softer underside, but it's too late. The claws squeeze. The armor that protected it from so many small bites and scrapes now groans under focused pressure. Joints strain. Plates creak. The Eurypterid brings it closer, starts working its mouth against any exposed edge, probing for softness between plates. The rest of the trilobites scatter, legs churning, antennae whipping, but there's no attempt to rescue their captured companion. They just flee, each one desperate to rejoin the safety of the group, to lose themselves in the swarm again. The message is clear. Stray even a little too far from the crowd and the sea scorpions take you. Again and again, day after day, you start to notice how the Eurypterids use the landscape. One positions itself just beside a small ridge in the sand, letting the current bring tiny creatures right past its claws. Another lurks behind a rock, darting out to surprise anything that rounds the corner. Some wedge themselves partly into burrows, using the tight space as both cover and trap. They're not just brutes, they're tacticians at their scale. Now imagine being something tiny rather than mid-sized. A worm, a shrimp-like swimmer, a small vulnerable thing that can't hope to fight back if those claws close around you. You would live your entire life in a state of low-level dread, never fully relaxed, never fully safe. Even when the water feels still and empty, you'd know, in whatever simple way your brain understands fear, that something armoured and patient might be lying just a few centimetres beneath the sand, watching, waiting, hungry. As time passes, currents shift. The water darkens, then clears again. New generations of sea scorpions appear, grow, hunt, and die. Their shells settle into the sediment, layer upon layer, becoming part of the seafloor itself. But in the moment when they're alive, when they're gliding over the sand, claws opening and closing, eyes scanning, they're perfect little tanks in a world with no mercy. And then, long before their age of dominance will fade, we go back even further, much further, to a time when the rules of hunting were being invented for the very first time. You feel the clock wind backward into the deep past until it stops in the Cambrian period, over 500 million years ago. The ocean here is stranger, wilder. Life is still experimenting, trying out all kinds of bizarre body plans. The water is filled with alien shapes, spiny, soft-bodied, finned, tentacled, none of them quite like anything you'd recognize from modern seas. The seafloor is a patchwork of burrows, tracks and mounds, where creatures dig, hide and feed. You place yourself just above that seafloor, hovering in the water column like a small, soft creature, maybe a primitive worm or a simple swimmer. In every direction, something is moving. Tiny arthropods scuttling over the sediment, jelly-like animals pulsing through the water, odd leaf-shaped things anchored in place, filtering nutrients. But somewhere in the sediment, something else is waiting. At first, all you see is a small, round opening in the seafloor, just a dark circle, maybe a centimetre or two wide, like a little hole where something once poked through and retreated. It doesn't move. It doesn't reveal anything about what's below. You drift closer, curious, still nothing, no eyes, no claws, no teeth. You relax because your brain, even your imaginary one, expects danger to look like something. But danger doesn't always advertise itself. Deep inside that burrow is a creature called a toya, a priapulid worm with a very particular way of making a living. Its body is soft and cylindrical, buried safely in the sediment, but at the top, tucked away like a collapsed hose, is its secret weapon, a proboscis armed with teeth. It doesn't hunt like a sea scorpion, patrolling the bottom and chasing things down. It doesn't soar like Meganeura or drop from trees like Sinornithosaurus. It waits, patiently. Every so often the proboscis extends just a little, testing the water, tasting it, sensing the faint chemical signatures of passing life. Then it retreats again, leaving only that dark, quiet opening behind. You swim directly over it. You don't feel anything at first, maybe just the faintest disturbance in the water. Then the seafloor moves. The proboscis launches out of the burrow in a sudden, horrifying burst. It's like a fleshy, muscular tube snapping open, ringed with tiny, sharp teeth. It shoots upward faster than you'd think something soft could move, expanding as it comes, like an umbrella of death turning inside out. You don't even get to register what's happening before it closes around you. Teeth clamp inward from all sides, not just one direction. It's not a bite, it's a circular trap. You feel yourself dragged down, the world above you shrinking as the burrow swallows you, sand and water closing overhead. For a heartbeat, there's a flurry of movement as you twist, maybe trying to back out, maybe wriggling, maybe doing anything at all to reverse what just happened. It doesn't matter. Otoya has you now. Inside the burrow where light never reaches, the worm's muscular body contracts and flexes, pulling you deeper. Its teeth aren't meant to slice you in half in one clean motion, they're meant to hold you, to keep you from escaping as it slowly maneuvers you into a position where it can begin breaking you down and feeding. From the surface, all anyone would see is a tiny swirl of disturbed sediment, and then nothing. The hole is just a hole again. Another small creature scuttles by a few minutes later, narrowly missing the trap zone. That's the horrible thing about Otoya's strategy. It doesn't need to go anywhere. It lets the buffet come to it. You imagine being a little arthropod crawling nearby, brushing the edge of that opening with one leg. Maybe you feel a faint current, a tiny change in pressure. Instinct whispers, move. You scamper away without knowing how close you came to disappearing forever into a fleshy tunnel of teeth. Otia, meanwhile, resets, proboscis folded back, mouth closed. Patience. It's not just random flailing when it strikes. It waits for the moment a prey animal is close enough, slow enough, unaware enough. Fossils suggest it may have eaten small worms, soft-bodied creatures, even pieces of larger animals when it could grab them. Now imagine an entire field of these burrows. From above it looks almost peaceful, just a flat patch of sediment pockmarked with little openings. A small animal swims over it, gliding, relaxed. For a few seconds nothing happens, then burst. 2 or 3 Otoya strike at once, proboscises erupting from the seafloor like living harpoons. One misses and retracts with a frustrated twist. Another grazes its target, but not enough to catch. The third lands perfectly, teeth locking around soft flesh. In a blink, one small animal vanishes beneath the surface while the others flee in panic. The seafloor stills. Holes remain. Otoya doesn't roar. It doesn't even move more than a few centimeters. But that small motion, repeated countless times over countless years, makes it one of the earliest true ambush predators we know of. And there's something especially disturbing about that. Later predators, like raptors and sea scorpions, at least give you something visible to fear. You could see them coming, sometimes too late, but at least they exist above the surface. Otoya is the fear of what you can't see, the fear of calm sand that suddenly isn't, the fear that the ground itself might reach up, grab you, and drag you into a darkness from which there is no return. If you lived in that Cambrian ocean and you were small enough to be on its menu, the seafloor wouldn't be a stable platform. It would be a minefield of hidden mouths. You would never truly rest. Every shadow, every burrow, every hole in the sediment would feel like a question. Is that just empty? Or is something down there listening for the faint vibration of my passing? And if you chose wrong, even once, you'd find out the answer from the inside. The first thing you notice is the quiet. Not the peaceful kind. This quiet feels like everything is listening. You're standing in a world that's just beginning to recover from the worst extinction Earth has ever seen. It's the early Triassic. Most of the great reptilian dynasties that will one day rule the planet haven't shown up yet. The land is harsh. Dusty ground, scrubby plants struggling up between rocks, patches of low ferns and hardy shrubs scattered like survivors on a battlefield. The sun is hot and unforgiving during the day, baking the soil into cracked plates, but now the light is fading. Temperatures drop fast, the shadows stretch out. The air cools and tightens, making your breath feel sharp in your lungs. This is when it wakes up. Between two rocks, almost invisible until you're right on top of it, there's a narrow opening in the ground. A burrow entrance, not much wider than your arm around it. The soil is disturbed, pressed down by repeated comings and goings. A faint smell of animal and earth drifts from the darkness. Inside that tunnel, curled with the practiced efficiency of a creature that has spent countless nights in the dirt, lies Thrinaxodon. Its body is small, about the size of a fox or a little terrier, but this is not a dog. It's a synapsid, a distant proto-mammal, wearing the transitional blueprint that will one day give rise to creatures like you. It has a long, low body, sturdy limbs held more vertically than a reptile's, a tail that isn't too long, and a head shaped in a way that feels eerily familiar. Strong jaws, a differentiated set of teeth, and sockets that hint at forward-facing eyes. Its sides rise and fall in slow, steady breaths. You notice the details that fossils hint at but can't fully show, the faint suggestion of fur or hair along its body, whisker-like sensory structures around the snout, tiny muscles twitching as it sniffs the air even in sleep. This isn't a cold-blooded lurker warming itself in the sun. It's warmer, more active, more mammal-like. Night deepens. Above ground, small reptiles begin to move, skittering between rocks in search of insects as plant shoots. In the distance, a larger reptile plods through the scrub, its heavy steps leaving tracks in the dust. Insects chirp and buzz, building a rhythm inside the dark. Inside the burrow, Thrinaxodon's eyes snap open. It doesn't leap to its feet right away. It lies still for a moment, listening. Its entire body is tuned to vibration. The faint crunch of footsteps nearby, the distant scrape of claws, the muffled rumble of something big passing far away. Its whiskers twitch, picking up the tiniest shifts in airflow. Then slowly it uncurls. Short, powerful limbs push its body upward. Its claws dig into the packed dirt as it crawls toward the burrow entrance. For a second, its nose appears in the opening, sniffing, tasting scents carried on the night air. Dust, plants, insects, and the faint hint of something else. Prey. It emerges. At first, all you see is the head. The skull looks surprisingly modern, like a cross between a reptile and a small mammal predator. The eyes adjust quickly to the low light. It blinks, then steps all the way out. Its body sliding from the burrow with silent, practiced ease. Up close you can imagine its fur lying short and dense, insulating it from temperature swings. You can imagine the ripple of muscle along its shoulders as it moves. This thing doesn't waste energy. Every step is measured, compact, efficient. It freezes suddenly. Off to the left, among a cluster of rocks, a small reptile about the size of a mouse is busy clawing at the dirt, digging for something edible. It tosses aside bits of soil, tail flicking occasionally, attention locked on its little excavation. Thrinaxodon watches. It doesn't rush. It lowers its body closer to the ground, almost flattening itself, head forward, ears, if it has small external ones, tilted to catch every sound. This isn't a lumbering reptile reacting slowly to movement. This is a predator that plans. Step by step it moves through the shadows, hugging rocks and plants, always keeping something between itself and its target. Its paws land softly on the dirt, claws curling slightly for better grip. It's not incredibly fast in his sprint compared to some future predators, but it doesn't need a long chase. It needs one good launch. The little reptile pauses, sensing something. It lifts its head and glances around, but it's looking too far away, checking the open ground, the horizon. It doesn't realize the danger is already within a few body lengths, pressed tight to the ground, hidden in the dark. Thrinaxodon tenses, muscles coil. In that instant, it feels less like a primitive ancestor and more like something you know very well. A cat about to pounce. It explodes into motion. There's no drawn-out chase. In 2 or 3 bounding strides, it closes the distance. Its jaws snap open, revealing a deadly combination of teeth, sharp incisors for gripping, slicing canines for puncturing, and shearing cheek teeth that can crush and tear. The reptile barely turns before those jaws close around it. You hear a muffled squeal, a brief flurry of movement. Thrinaxodon's body hunches forward, paws pinning the struggling prey. It bites again, harder, directing its jaws toward the neck or chest, places where a pulse beats and a mistake is fatal. Then, suddenly, the struggling stops. Thrinaxodon pauses over the body, sides heaving once or twice, nose still flaring, making sure nothing bigger is closing in. Only when the night remains quiet does it begin to feed. You watch as it tears strips of flesh with sharp pulling motions, using its front paws to anchor the carcass. The way it eats looks disturbingly modern, like a small wild dog ripping into its kill or a mongoose dismembering a snake. In its world there are no lions, no wolves, no big cats, but the job they do one day, Thrinaxodon is already rehearsing it. When it's eaten enough, it doesn't leave the leftovers out in the open for scavengers. It grabs what remains in its jaws and drags it back toward the burrow. Body low, steps quick but not panicked. Once inside, it disappears into the darkness where pups or mates might be waiting, safe from larger predators. The surface looks empty again. Only scuffed soil and a faint dark stain hint that anything violent just happened. Hours pass. The night wears on. Thrinaxodon emerges again later, its nose leading the way, searching for new opportunities. It doesn't need much to survive. Small reptiles, insects, maybe hatchlings of other creatures. In a recovering ecosystem where many niches are empty and life is slowly repopulating the world, a small, adaptable predator like this thrives. You follow it as it moves between rocks and low plants, sometimes stopping to dig. Its claws are blunt but strong, capable of scraping into dirt and loosening soil. Insects scatter. Tiny burrowing animals squirm deeper. It doesn't catch something every time, but it doesn't need every attempt to succeed. Every failed pounce, every missed scuttle is just another lesson in a brain that's already drifting toward the cleverness of mammals. It adapts. It remembers where prey tends to hide, which areas are better at night, which parts of the terrain conceal danger instead of opportunity. You imagine living as a small creature in this world, something that sleeps lightly, eats quickly, and never lingers too long in open ground. The big reptiles are dangerous, yes, but you can see them coming. You hear their lumbering steps. You spot their shadows long before they get close. Thrinaxodon is different. It is the rustle in the scrub that suddenly stops. The quiet pause before something bursts from the darkness. The soft, padded footsteps you don't hear until they're only a heartbeat away. It doesn't dominate the world through size, but through precision, through adaptability, through a creepy early version of mammal-like cunning. It may not be huge or impressive by later standards, but if you were its size or smaller, it would be the face of terror in the night, eyes glinting, nose twitching, teeth glistening in the dim light. It's easy to feel proud of being descended from creatures like this. It's also easy to realize that if you'd been here with them, you would have wanted to stay very, very far away. Time moves again. The dust and scrub of the Triassic fade, replaced by mist and leaves. The air cools and thickens, rich with the smell of wet bark and fresh growth. You're back in the Jurassic now. Return to a forest world where ferns, ginkgos and conifers knit together into a dense layered canopy. The ground is dim, shadows dominate, but above, branches mesh into a tangled highway of wood and leaves, and that's where the real danger lives. You shift your focus upward. A branch stretches over an open patch of forest floor thick enough to bear the weight of small creatures. Moss clings to its bark. Fungus sprouts in patches. Tiny insects crawl in lines along cracks and flakes, scraping out a living in quiet anonymity. Then something lands on it with a soft thud. It's light, barely bending the branch, but it's not an insect. At first, your brain tries to label it as a bird. It's small, about the size of a pigeon, covered in feathers, with a long tail fan, wings tucked close to its sides, but the proportions are off. The skull is too long and lined with teeth. The legs are too strong, ending in sharp claws. Feathers spill not just from its arms, but down its legs as well. Anchiornis. It tilts its head, one eye staring down toward the forest floor, the other scanning the branches ahead. Light glints off the surface of its eye, alert, calculating. It gives a tiny shuffle, adjusting its grip, claws digging deeper into bark. Then it moves with a flurry of controlled hopping steps, almost like a squirrel crossed with a bird. It doesn't glide just yet. It's choosing its perch, picking the angle. Below, on the forest floor, a juvenile lizard darts between patches of fallen leaves, chasing after a beetle. It stops now and then, head jerking, tongue flicking. It knows there are threats in the undergrowth. Larger carnivorous dinosaurs, snakes, other reptiles. But its eyes are mostly on the horizontal plane, not on the branches overhead. Anchiornis stops above it. The predator's feathers ruffle slightly as it shifts its posture. It raises its body, spreading its arms and legs just a little. You can see the overlapping feathers on the limbs, the early experimental blueprint of wings on both forelimbs and hind limbs. These aren't the sleek, long-distance flight wings of modern birds. They're messy, transitional, but perfect for short glides and controlled drops. Anchiornis leans forward, tail fans out like a rudder. Gravity waits. Then, silent as a falling leaf, it drops. It doesn't dive like a falcon. It falls and glides, arms and legs outstretched, feathers gripping the air enough to guide its path. The distance is small, but in this environment, small height differences are huge advantages. The lizard looks up too late. Anchiornis slams into it feet first, claws driving down with stunning precision. One foot pins the lizard's body, another pins its tail. The impact sends leaves flying and a little explosion of debris. The lizard twists and tries to bite, but Anchiornis is faster. Its head darts down, jaws snapping shut around the side of the lizard's neck. Teeth sink in. There's a brief struggle, legs thrashing, tail whipping, but the predator's claws are hooks, and the lizard can't get free. Anchiornis bites again, harder this time, teeth sliding between scales. The thrashing slows, then stops. The forest goes back to its ordinary sounds. If you were small and living under this canopy, how would you even begin to feel safe? You wouldn't just be checking the bushes, you'd be checking the trees, the branches, the empty patches of sky between leaves. Every rustle above could be nothing, or could be this little feathered killer repositioning for a better angle. Anchiornis doesn't stay on the ground. Its power isn't in chasing prey across open spaces, it's in controlling the vertical landscape. It grabs its prize with its claws and hops back toward the base of a tree, then clambers up the trunk with surprising ease, claws scraping into bark like crampons. Higher up, it settles on another branch, out of reach of most ground dwellers, and begins to eat. It takes small bites, tearing strips from the lizard, sometimes lifting its head to scan the surroundings between mouthfuls. It's not alone in the trees. Another Anchiornis moves a few branches away, this one focused on something else entirely. Insects. It hops along, stabbing its head into crevices, picking beetles and larvae out of the bark. Every so often, it pauses, tilts its head, and leaps to a neighbouring branch with a quick flap of its feathered arms. Sometimes 2 or 3 of them end up foraging in overlapping ranges. They're not coordinated like wolves, but to a small animal caught under their overlapping attention, it feels like the forest is full of them. You watch as one Anchiornis spots a small bird-like animal, an even more primitive flyer, resting on a low branch. The victim closes its eyes briefly, thinking it's found a safe spot to doze. Anchiornis uses branches like stepping stones, hopping closer, never making enough noise to fully startle its target. It stops just a short leap away, feathers settling, head lowered. Then it launch hops. A short, powerful jump aided by a quick flap of its feathered arms and legs carries it straight onto the resting animal. Claws dig in immediately. There's a flurry of wings as both creatures struggle, feathers exploding around them like torn paper. But Anchiornis has the element of surprise and better weapons. Its teeth close around the smaller animal's neck. You hear a brief strangled chirp, then nothing. Almost instantly, the forest swallows the sound. Down below, other creatures keep moving, unaware of the drama playing out just a few meters above their heads. The canopy hides both predator and prey. Even their deaths are swallowed by layers of leaves and branches. Anchiornis tears at its catch, feathers shifting and gleaming faintly in the dappled light. Some of its plumage might be patterned, maybe even coloured, browns, reds, blacks, broken stripes and patches that help it vanish against the visual chaos of bark and leaves. Camouflage isn't just for prey. Predators need it too. You imagine being something small and tree-dwelling here. You'd spend your life climbing, scrambling, gliding, always trying to stay one step ahead of things that can reach you. The ground is dangerous. The canopy is dangerous. The spaces in between are dangerous. Anchiornis owns those in-between spaces. It's not a master of long-range flight. It doesn't need to cross continents. It just needs to cover the distance between one branch and the next with total control, to turn every hop into a potential ambush, every glide into a silent attack. In that sense, it's like a parkour assassin, using the structure of the environment as a weapon. From above, it's a shadow that moves when the leaves move. From below, it's a small, harmless shape you mistake for a regular bird, right up until the moment it falls on you with claws first and teeth bared. In the grand history of life, animals like Thrinaxedon and Anchiornis don't dominate through sheer size. They don't trample forests or shake the earth. They move quietly. They live in the margins, in burrows and branches, in cracks and shadows at the edge of vision, turning those safe spaces into hunting grounds. And if you were unlucky enough to live at their scale in their time, you wouldn't remember them as interesting transitional forms or important evolutionary steps. You'd remember them as the thing that appeared out of nowhere, the thing that hunted you while everything else believed the world was calm.